Stop scrolling. Because the woman you're about to meet didn't carry a weapon. She didn't command an army. She didn't have power. She didn't have money. But she did something so extraordinary that more than 2,500 children are alive today because of her courage. Now imagine this. It's the middle of World War II. The streets are silent. Soldiers patrol every corner. Families disappear overnight. Children cry behind locked walls, knowing tomorrow may never come. And in the middle of that nightmare, one ordinary woman makes an impossible decision. Not to run, not to hide, but to walk directly into one of the most dangerous places in occupied Europe. Again and again and again. Every trip could be her last. Every step could end in arrest. Every mistake could mean death. Yet she kept going. Why? Because she believed one simple truth. If you can save one child, you save an entire future. This isn't fiction. This isn't a Hollywood movie. This is one of the greatest true stories almost nobody knows. The story of a woman who risked everything to save children she had never met. And what she did next would become one of the most courageous rescue missions in human history. September, the world changed forever. Germany invaded Poland. Within days, cities were bombed, roads filled with frightened families, homes were destroyed, entire neighborhoods disappeared beneath smoke and fire. The peaceful life millions once knew was gone. Occupation brought fear, new laws, constant surveillance. People learned that even whispering the wrong words could have terrible consequences. Among those suffering most were Poland's Jewish families. They were stripped of their rights, separated from society, forced from their homes. Eventually, hundreds of thousands were confined inside a sealed district in Warsaw, later known as the Warsaw Ghetto. High walls surrounded it. Barbed wire blocked escape. Guards controlled every entrance. Food became scarce. Medicine almost disappeared. Disease spread rapidly through overcrowded streets. Children suffered the most. Many were too young to understand why their world had suddenly become so cruel. They only knew they were hungry, cold, afraid. Parents face impossible choices every single day. How do you comfort a child when you can't even promise they'll survive tomorrow? Outside the walls, life continued. Inside, hope faded with each passing day. But not everyone looked away. Among the people working in Warsaw was a young Polish social worker named Irena Sendler. She wasn't famous. She wasn't wealthy. She wasn't a politician. She was simply someone who believed every human life had value. Long before the war, her father had taught her something she would never forget. When someone is drowning, you help them not because they're famous, not because they're important, but because they're human. Those words became the foundation of her life. As the occupation grew harsher, Irena witnessed suffering that most people could hardly imagine. Children wandering without parents, families weakened by hunger, hospitals struggling without supplies. Every day brought another heartbreaking scene. Most people felt powerless. Many were too frightened to act, and fear was understandable. Helping Jewish families wasn't just dangerous. It carried the risk of imprisonment or death. Even offering food or shelter could have devastating consequences. The message from the occupying authorities was clear. Anyone who helped would pay a terrible price. Fear spread quickly. Silence became a form of survival. But there are moments in history when silence protects you, and moments when silence costs innocent lives. Irena understood that difference. She also understood something else. Time was running out. Every day inside the ghetto, conditions became worse. Every week, more families disappeared. More children became orphaned. More hope vanished. She couldn't save everyone. Nobody could. But perhaps she could save someone. One child. Then another. Then another. The question wasn't whether it would be dangerous. It already was. The real question was, how could anyone possibly rescue children from a place surrounded by walls, guards, and constant surveillance? It sounded impossible. Almost everyone believed it was. But history has a strange habit. It often changes because one ordinary person refuses to accept the word impossible And soon, Irena Sendler would begin a mission so daring, so dangerous, and so unbelievable that it would become one of the greatest rescue operations of World War II. But first, she had to find a way to walk into the Warsaw Ghetto without raising suspicion. The first step was getting inside. Most people spent every ounce of energy trying to escape the Warsaw Ghetto, but Irena Sendler was trying to get in. Again and again, she worked for Warsaw's social welfare department, which gave her legitimate reasons to enter the ghetto to inspect sanitation and help prevent the spread of disease. That official permit became something far more valuable, a doorway. Every time the gates opened, she walked into a world where hope was disappearing. Children with empty eyes, parents weakened by hunger, families crowded into tiny rooms, silence, broken only by crying. She knew something terrible was coming. The longer the children stayed, the smaller their chances of survival became. But saving them would demand something almost impossible. She had to convince parents to let go. Imagine being a mother, holding your son for what might be the last time. A stranger stand before you. She whispers, "I can try to save your child, but I can't promise you'll ever see them again." What would you do? Trust her or keep your child beside you? Knowing the danger was growing every day, those were impossible choices. Many parents cried. Some refused. Others looked into their children's eyes and made the most painful decision of their lives. Not because they wanted to, because they loved them enough to risk never seeing them again. One child became two. Two became five. Five became dozens. Now came the hardest part, getting them out. Every gate was guarded. Every movement was watched. Every mistake could cost countless lives. There wasn't one escape route. There were many, and each one carried enormous risk. Some of the youngest children were quietly hidden inside ambulances traveling in and out of the ghetto under official health inspections. Others were concealed inside toolboxes or supply crates large enough to carry a small child. Some escaped through buildings that connected the streets outside the walls. Others were guided through underground passages by members of the resistance. False identity papers were prepared. New names were created. New birthdays. New families. New lives. Every rescued child would have to disappear so they could survive. One frightened cry could expose everything. One nervous guard could end the mission forever. Every rescue demanded perfect timing, perfect planning, and extraordinary courage. The operation grew larger. Trusted doctors, nurses, priests, drivers, members of the Polish underground, ordinary citizens, each accepted enormous personal risk, not for recognition, not for reward, but because innocent children deserved a future. Some babies were too young to understand what was happening. Older children understood enough to be terrified. Before leaving, they were often told something no child should ever have to hear. You must stay quiet, no matter what happens. If someone asks your name, use the new one. Imagine carrying that responsibility at 6 years old, or 8, leaving your parents behind, walking toward strangers, not knowing whether you'd ever see home again. Yet they kept moving, because the alternative was even more frightening. Outside the ghetto, safe houses were waiting. Some children were placed with Polish families willing to risk everything. Others found shelter in orphanages, convents, or religious institutions where they could remain hidden. Every placement had to look ordinary. Every document had to withstand inspection. Every detail mattered. But Irena understood something else. Saving a child's life wasn't enough. One day, the war would end. Families would search for loved ones. Children would ask who they really were. Their true identities couldn't disappear forever. So she began writing down every child's real name alongside the new identity they had been given. She carefully recorded where each child had been placed. Those handwritten lists became priceless. If they were discovered, everyone involved could be arrested. So she sealed the names inside glass jars. Then, she buried those jars beneath an apple tree in a trusted friend's garden. Hidden beneath the earth lay the identities of thousands of children, a secret waiting for peace. Day after day, week after week, The rescue mission continued. Every successful escape made the danger even greater. Occupation authorities noticed children were disappearing. Security became tighter. Inspections became harsher. Questions became more aggressive. The risk increased with every mission. Yet Irena refused to stop. Because each time she looked into the eyes of another frightened child, she knew one thing. If she walked away, that child might never have another chance. But courage often comes with a price. The rescue network had become one of the most dangerous underground operations in occupied Poland. And eventually, someone was watching. Someone was gathering information. Someone was getting closer. Soon, the woman who had saved thousands of children would find herself facing the very danger she had spent years trying to outrun. Every secret eventually attracts attention. For years, the rescue network had done what many believed was impossible. Children kept disappearing from the Warsaw Ghetto, not into danger, but into hope. The occupying authorities became suspicious. How could so many children vanish? From one of the most heavily guarded places in occupied Europe, someone had to be helping them. The search began. More checkpoints, more interrogations, more surveillance. The walls were closing in. Yet Irena refused to stop. She knew that every day she delayed, more innocent lives could be lost. Then, in October 1943, the knock finally came. Armed officers arrived. Her home was searched. Papers were scattered across the floor. Every drawer was opened. Every corner examined. She was arrested. As she was taken away, one thought echoed through her mind. Not about herself. Not about her own future. But about the children. The lists. The names. If those records were discovered, thousands of children and the families hiding them would be in unimaginable danger. Fortunately, the jars remained hidden beneath the apple tree. Safe. For now, Irena was taken to prison. Days turned into endless interrogations. The questions never changed. Who helped you? Where are the children? Give us the names. They wanted everything. The rescue network, the hiding places, the false identities, the names of every person involved. She knew the truth. One answer could destroy everything. One name could send entire families to their deaths. So she remained silent. The pressure grew more intense. Hour after hour, day after day, she endured brutal treatment. Her captors believed that pain would eventually break her. That fear would become stronger than courage. But they misunderstood something. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to protect others, even when you're terrified. Every moment she stayed silent. Another child remained safe. Every name she refused to reveal protected another family. She had already risked her own life countless times. Now she was risking it one final time, not by entering the ghetto, but by refusing to betray those who trusted her. Outside the prison, the resistance had not forgotten her. Members of the Polish underground understood what was at stake. They knew that if Irena disappeared forever, one of the greatest rescue missions of the war might disappear with her. Plans were quietly set in motion. Contact were made. Messages passed in secret. Eventually, the resistance succeeded in securing her release through a covert operation involving officials who were bribed to facilitate her escape. To the outside world, records indicated that she had been executed. Her name appeared among the dead. For the authorities, the case was closed. But in reality, she was alive, forced into hiding, living under a false identity, unable to return to a normal life. Yet even after everything she had endured, she didn't abandon her mission. As long as the war continued, children still needed protection. She continued helping the underground whenever possible. Quietly, carefully, always knowing discovery could mean death. Then, after years of unimaginable suffering, the war in Europe finally came to an end. The fighting stopped. The occupation ended. The gates of the Warsaw Ghetto were gone. But victory did not erase the pain. Entire families had disappeared. Communities had been destroyed. Millions would never return home. Amid that heartbreaking reality, Irena remembered something buried beneath the earth. The glass jars. She returned to the garden, carefully digging beneath the apple tree. One by one, The jars emerged. Inside were hundreds upon hundreds of carefully written names. Each one represented a child, a real identity, a family, a history that deserved to survive. Those lists became invaluable. They helped reconnect surviving children with any relatives who could still be found. For many, no family remained. The war had taken everything. But because Irena had protected those records, their true identities had not been lost forever. History often remembers generals, politicians, and battles. But sometimes, the greatest victories are written quietly, on scraps of paper, hidden inside glass jars, buried beneath an ordinary tree, by one extraordinary woman. Yet perhaps the most unbelievable part of the story was still to come, because after risking everything, after saving approximately 2,500 children, the world would remain almost completely silent about her courage. For decades, when the war finally ended, the guns fell silent, the walls came down, the world celebrated victory. But for millions of families, there was nothing left to celebrate. Entire neighborhoods had disappeared. Parents searched for children who would never return. Children searched for parents who were gone forever. The war had ended, but the heartbreak had only begun. Among the ruins, one woman quietly continued her work, not for fame, not for recognition, but for the children whose lives she had fought to protect. Because of her courage, approximately 2,500 Jewish children had survived. Some were reunited with surviving relatives. Others learned that no one from their family had made it through the war. Imagine discovering your true identity years later, learning that the name you'd grown up with was never your real name, learning that somewhere a stranger had risked everything, just so you could have a future. For many of those children, that stranger was Irena Sendler, and yet the world barely knew her name. No movie deals, no worldwide fame, no headlines celebrating her courage. For decades, her story remained hidden. Politics after the war, along with the passage of time, meant that many extraordinary acts of courage received little international attention. The woman who had carried thousands of children towards safety lived quietly, never calling herself a hero. Whenever people praised her, she answered with remarkable humility. She believed she hadn't done enough. Imagine that, a woman who saved around 2,500 lives, still wondering if she could have saved more. That's what true courage looks like. It doesn't ask for applause. It asks, what more can I do? Years passed, decades passed, then something unexpected happened. Students researching forgotten heroes uncovered her incredible story. Slowly, the world began to listen. People realized that one of history's greatest rescue missions had almost been forgotten. Awards followed. Recognition arrived. But by then, Irena was already an elderly woman. She accepted the honors with the same quiet humility she had always shown. Because medals had never been her goal. Saving children had been. And perhaps that's why her story continues to inspire people today. Not because she was fearless, but because she chose compassion over fear. Think about your own life. Most of us will never face decisions as impossible as hers. We won't be asked to walk into a war zone. We won't be asked to risk our lives to rescue thousands. But every day, life gives us smaller choices. Will you help or look away? Will you speak up or stay silent? Will you do what's right, even when it's difficult? History isn't changed only by famous leaders. Sometimes, it's changed by ordinary people who refuse to ignore suffering. Irena Sendler had no army, no wealth, no political power, only courage, compassion, and the belief that every child deserved a chance to live. One person, one decision, can change thousands of lives. Never underestimate the impact of kindness. Never believe that your actions are too small to matter, because somewhere, someone's future may depend on a choice you make today. If this extraordinary true story moved you, take a moment to remember the thousands of children whose lives continued, because one woman refused to give up on humanity. If this documentary inspired you, please leave a like, Subscribe to Rise from Zero for more powerful true stories of ordinary people who accomplished the extraordinary. And before you leave, go to the comments and write these 5 words. One person can change everything. Not for the algorithm, not for the views, but as a promise that whenever life gives you the chance to choose between fear and compassion, you'll choose compassion. Because the greatest heroes rarely wear uniforms. They don't ask for attention. They don't expect rewards. They simply do what is right, even when the cost is everything. Long after wars are forgotten, the lives you save become your greatest legacy.